Okay. Meeting to order. We're
On
gonna
the roll, Gomez,
here.
Almascati,
Here.
Burley,
Here.
Renan,
Here.
Hageman, here, Jones,
Here.
McAlexander. Here. Everyone's here.
Okay, so we're gonna need a motion to approve the agenda that you all received.
So move.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Public comments that are not on the published agenda.
Approve the meeting minutes.
Oh, they're approved.
Well, there has to be a motion to approve the minutes.
Oh, okay. I'm going through an IRTF audit, you know, the, it goes through the same thing.
We just did our ISOs, yeah.
All right, so we need a motion to approve the minutes.
Yes, the January 31st, 2024 meeting minutes.
Okay,
I'd move to approve the minutes.
second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, they're approved.
Perfect.
Now we can go to public comments not on the published agenda. No? Having none, we're going to review the rules of village meetings, just to refresh everybody's memory. And Kim can do that for us.
Would you like me to read through them? All right, I will do so. Okay, these rules were adopted by Village Council October 28th, 2019.
And they are in your packet.
And they are in the packet, and I'll just read through these all. These rules have been established by resolution of the Bingham Farms Village Council pursuant to section 3 of the Open Meetings Act, MCL 15.263, with the purpose of establishing behavior and conduct at all village meetings. Failing to abide by these rules after being ordered to do so by the meeting chairperson shall be treated as a breach of the peace and possibly subject to the violator to exclusion from the meeting. The definition of person in the enumerations below includes all elected and or appointed officials, commissioners, board members, and employees, all village consultants and contracted employees, and all members of the public regardless of residency. 1, no person may speak at a meeting until recognized and allowed by the chairperson. When physically possible, persons wishing to speak should indicate their intention by raising a hand. Interruption by any person is prohibited except to notify the speaker of his or her remaining time or to raise a point of order. 2, no member of the public may speak at meetings unless they first provide their name and address. 3, members of the public speaking at a meeting shall address their statements to council, commission, board, not to other members of the public that may be in attendance. There should be no dialogue or discussion between or questioning of members of the public. 4, all persons in attendance shall not use vulgar, obscene, or physically threatening language or conduct when speaking or observing. 5, mobile phones and pagers must be on vibrate or silent mode during meetings. 6, a member of the public may speak one time for no more than 3 minutes during public comment on matters that are not on the meeting agenda. In response to public comment and subject to applicable parliamentary rules, council may, but shall not be required to, place the subject of a public comment on the agenda of that or a future meeting for additional discussion. 7, a person that is not a party or petitioner applicant with respect to an agenda item may speak one time for no more than 3 minutes prior to council action on that item. Comments shall be strictly limited to the agenda item. 8, public hearings are for the public. Council members shall not speak until after the hearing is closed. Once the hearing is closed, comments from the public shall no longer be accepted. 9, when a large number of people wish to make the same point or speak on the same agenda item or are represented by a subdivision, association, or similar representative, they may be required to designate no more than 2 representatives to present positions opposing, and no more than 2 representatives supporting the item under consideration. Each presentation is limited to 3 minutes. However, a person cannot legally be prohibited from speaking in a meeting simply because it is duplicative or what was said by another person. 10, a designated member of the body holding the meeting or other person shall be responsible for keeping time with an accurate device and advising the chairperson when the speaker's allowed time has expired. 11, the time limits in these rules shall not apply to presentations by petitioners, applicants, or parties, including village staff and consultants on an agenda item, appeal, or similar hearings. In such situations, each person and or their representatives shall be provided 15 minutes. 12, persons wishing to speak or make a presentation to council in connection with a requested or scheduled agenda item that will take longer than 15 minutes shall be scheduled through the village administrator. No such person shall exceed 30 minutes. 13, the recording of any meeting shall not disrupt the meeting in any manner, including beeping sounds or other noise, excessive movement, or moving to different locations. 14, after a final vote on a motion, no further comments will be accepted. However, this does not prevent a member of council from making a motion to amend, rescind, or reconsider a previous motion. 15, all persons in attendance at a meeting shall conduct themselves in an orderly and non-disruptive manner, refraining from private conversations and speaking only when recognized and allowed by the chairperson. Adults should be responsible for the conduct of any children that accompany them in a meeting. 16, these rules should be enforceable by the chairperson with violations presented as a point of order by any member of the sitting body. By a discretionary majority vote of members present, these rules may be amended or suspended in connection with a specific item. And that concludes the reading of the rules.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may. I would like to amend those rules a little bit for this particular committee. Reason being, as I've talked about before, I would like to have a dialogue between council and whomever is in the audience if they have some terrific stuff to present. Therefore, I would move that we allow dialogue between council and recognized residents.
So that's in the form of a motion.
That is in the form of a motion. So
You got a second?
A second.
Now, can we comment on it?
Discuss. Now you have a discussion regarding the motion.
All right, so can we apply the same time limits, Dean, under your,
I wouldn't think so. If somebody's got a great idea and it's worthwhile discussing, then obviously the 3 minutes would not be enough time. This is just, again, to open up more dialogue, because in our meeting rules, we only allow audience to talk. We can't have a dialogue we can have a dialogue between us, but we can't have a dialogue between them. And that's what, and that's only for this committee. That would not pertain to council or anything else.
so you're proposing 3 minutes per response?
I'm not proposing a time limit, per
No.
se.
Loosey goosey.
I don't foresee, again, you being chairman can say, we've discussed that enough, let's move on. So, but again, just so we can have a dialogue between who's ever in the audience. Somebody may have a great idea that we don't know about, and was the whole idea behind that.
I would think that if becomes excessively used, we could always reimpose the time limits if it became necessary.
Yeah.
So we'll have a discretionary time limit. Okay. Any other discussion? So, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay,
Got it?
got it.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay, so the next order of business is to have our engineers, or our engineer discuss the project.
Folks, let me introduce Brad Shepler to you. He is engineer with Hubble Rock and Clark. And his team has put together the estimates that you have in your packet. His team has done all of the research. He has presented the findings in the past to council, and he's going to do so again, so that you all have a clear picture of where all of this information has come from and possibly where we might be going. We will have a Q&A session following the presentation, so if you have questions that might involve length, please feel free to, please hold them. If there's a quick here or there, I think that would be appropriate, but if you're dealing with something really involved, let's hold it till after the presentation. Go ahead, Brad, whenever you're ready.
All right, thank you, Ken. Again, my name is Brad Shepler. Bill West, who did this presentation with me in November, had knee surgery last week, so he's unable to make it, but he is our roadway materials guru. He did all the field work on this and gave his recommendations. He has over 20 years experience doing this as well. So we were very, very lucky to get him from his geotechnical firm that he worked with before to come work with us. For those of you that have seen this presentation before, you know, apologize that I have to go through it again, but there's some that haven't. So this is what Ken kind of wanted me to do, is give a little background of how we got to where we are right now. So back in early 2022, Ken had approached HRC about developing cost estimates for the roadway network, realizing that the current Act 51 funds that the village received was not enough to maintain and improve the current roadway network. At that time, we had little information to go from beyond what we could visually see through Google Maps and just our experience, essentially. So we put together a couple estimates for a major rehabilitation of the roads and a full reconstruction of the roads, not knowing that if we could do anything less. So those cost estimates came out pretty high. I'm sure there was kind of a culture shock to that. I think it was between 12 and 18 million dollars for the entire roadway network to do those types of improvements. As such, Ken had council direct us to do some more investigations, more evaluations to try and say, okay, well, what can we really, because we were kind of like, hey, we didn't have very much information to go off of, so our estimates are kind of conservative. We think we can bring these numbers down a little bit, but we need to collect more information to do that. So we got the okay to do that. We got a grant from SEMCOG to do what's called a PASER rating. It's a pavement analysis or a pavement survey evaluation. It's pretty much just a windshield look at all the roads from a trained expert to give the condition of those roads. We also were authorized to do pavement cores, which were to dig into the ground using a rig that creates a circle, essentially, so there's not too destructive to the pavement, to really, and it can go down about 3 feet. So to get a real good core sample of how much pavement's there, how much base is there, what the underlying soils are like, et cetera, so we can do a better evaluation of maybe less intensive improvements to these roads that will still provide you a better road. So that's what we did from April of 2022 to November of 2023, essentially. So those are the roads that we looked at. Here were the original ones that I talked about, 12 million to 17 million. And the updated cost estimates of what you guys have in your packets here for what we were able to do. So we were able to lower that cost significantly. Unfortunately, during that time from April 2022 to November 2023, we saw historic inflation in terms of construction materials. We're talking like 8 to 10% per year inflationary costs. So they didn't come down as much as we had hoped. There's also a couple roads that we were not really recommending you could do more than a major rehab. And those are those ones that are kind of highlighted in blue here: Bristol Lane, Bristol Court, Brittner Court, Sacred Court, because of the underlying soils. Just kind of doing a surface treatment to those and minimal rehabilitation was not going to correct the underlying deficiencies in that road or help maintain that road's condition. It was just going to continually disintegrate, and we felt that doing any type of surface treatment was just going to be a waste of dollars, essentially. So those are the 4 roads that we really found weren't constructed in the best means. The other ones are satisfactory. with that. So we'll go through the PASER rating again. This is what the PASER rating is called. Pavement surface evaluation and rating. Again, this is kind of an industry standard throughout the Midwest. What they use. It's a 1 to 10 scale, 10 being pretty much a brand new road. Down to 1, which is a failed road. So most of the roadways in Bingham Farms rated in the 3 to 4, high end of the poor range in terms of construction, which is probably pretty good for the fact that I don't believe they've been fully reconstructed since 1984. I think that was when they were really, a lot of money was put into them. There's been some improvements over the years, but most of those have been patching type work and things like that, maybe some chip sealing, surface type treatments. So essentially you've gotten, if you do the math, 40 years or so out of a asphalt road, which is really, really good. But so these conditions represent the investment that's been put into the roads since 1984. There's one really good road, Brooks Lane, down at the south end, has pretty good soils and very little traffic. So that road is kept up pretty well. And you got 2 concrete roads that are in pretty decent shape. Concrete roads tend to last a little bit longer. However, there are poor soils underneath those, so we wouldn't recommend any type of full reconstruction of those roads. You're just gonna bring up a lot of slop, it's underneath them. So some patching is pretty much all you can really do with that, just to kind of hold those together. But they are in pretty good shape. So these are the results from the coring program, and I do have a map up here. It's this map right here, which is really hard to see online here. I do have a full size map of it. I can leave that with you guys, so you guys can kind of take a look at it at your leisure. But we did, I think, 30 pavement cores throughout the village to collect and analyze the thicknesses of the asphalt, the underlying aggregate base that might be there, and then the underlying soils, which give you a bearing capacity, if you want to call it that. There's a analysis rating called the California Bearing Rating. And this is Bill's expertise. He can tell you a lot more about this, but when you get to 0 to 5, it's a poor underlying soil, and 6 is greater than that. So these all have pavement thickness, aggregate base thickness, and then the CBR value underneath it. So again, I have it. You can take a look at it later, or I think I can email Ken this presentation in a PDF form, so you can kind of zoom in on it and take a look at it. But this map kind of gives a better description of the ones in orange have suitable soils underneath it. The ones in yellow do not have suitable soils underneath it. And the ones in green are the concrete roads, essentially. So you're getting a lot of up on Hickory Hollow here, and Timber Ridge there, Shagwood, Fromm Lane, and then Bristol Lane. Really, and then the 2 areas where we get close to the river here, where you're gonna get your Marley, PD Moore soils and things like that are a little squishier. So doing that, we got a lot of good information on roads that we can just do kind of surface treatments on, maybe a little more major for surface treatment, which I'll go over these a little bit, and then the ones that we really need to do some type of drainage improvement, really take off a lot of the asphalt that's there and do more of a full rehabilitation of the road, not just a surface treatment. Here just goes into a little bit more detail on all the cores that we took, on all the roads, how they kind of related. Again, that's pretty much just this map in a table form. We also did this is the PASER rating, and we didn't do a roadway asset management plan for the village per se, but the PASER rating information was able to give us a little bit of information about how much money it would take to kind of maintain your roadway network. And I gave you an example with the Village of Beverly Hills, who we did do an asset management plan for. So we kind of just stole a lot of their calculations essentially there for the village, because it's a very similar way to do things. But each village has a Act 51 disbursement. They have an average PASER road rating that we got from the PASER rating from, again, SEMCOG gave us a grant to do that, so the village didn't have to spend any money to do that. But they give you an average PASER, and then you plug it into a a formula, and it gives you the predicted cost to maintain your existing road rating, which is just maintain, not improve, just maintain. So you can see here that the amount of money you get, and again, that $125,000 a year approximately that you get is not only for roadway improvements, but it's also for maintenance, pavement preservation, marking, signage, salt, all that type of stuff. So you really don't get 125,000 to put into roadway improvements. And it's saying that you need about 150,000 a year. So that's where Ken kind of came up with the, hey, with just our Act 51 dollars, we don't have enough to even maintain our roadway network, and nonetheless make it better. So this is kind of where this all kind of evolved from. Now, this chart is a really good chart. Here, this shows you how roadways deteriorate and when it's best to catch those. So there's a sharp curve from once they get down into this fair range that they begin to really deteriorate, and that's really why, because they start getting cracks in them. When we got Michigan winters, the freeze and thaw, they really deteriorate quickly through that fair zone, and then they kind of cycle out in the poor zone. It's really good to catch them in this good zone here. You can do a lot of maintenance. It's very cost effective, and you can spread that money a long way if you can catch them before they get too bad. The issue here is in the village, we're down in this area here. So we're getting, once you get down here, it's really expensive to fix. So a lot of times when we do these roadway maintenance programs, road rehabilitation programs, we honestly leave a lot of these roads and just kind of let them go until we can get some grant money or something to fix them, because it's a large expense. And you're doing it to one road, whereas you could be doing miles of other roads that are up in here to keep them up in there. So that's really what we want to try and get to. That point is to get these roads from that high poor range up into that fair range, and then just continue to maintain. And then we won't have to reconstruct, which is really expensive. So we went through kind of some of the options on what we can do. Obviously you can do nothing, but then the roads just continue to deteriorate back to a gravel form as they were. Maintain the existing rating. Obviously you would need some general fund type contribution, just to, because you're not collecting enough Act 51 to maintain. So you might have to give a little bit to kind of keep that $150,000 investment per year, which the Pacer model predicts. Or we could try and improve. The issue with trying to improve is, okay, what is the expectation of the village? How nice do you want them? Essentially, how nice you want them is gonna matter on how much you want to raise to improve them. So that's really what I think this whole committee is kind of for, is okay, what should we expect out of this? How should we mold this program to best use the village residents' funds, essentially? I believe that was the intent of this, correct, Ken?
Close enough.
Close enough. Ken's better at words than I am. So funding sources. So obviously we got general fund, which we try not to pull from too much. There's millages that you can do. You can do millages for maintenance, which is the continuous millage over and over again. That just kind of just a little bit of money that can just keep you at the status quo. There's obviously roadway improvement millages as well, where you can collect a little bit, save it up, and do a major program every 4 or 5 years, something like that, to kind of get you back up that curve that we were showing. There's also bonds or a millage where you can actually spend now then pay later, where you get a big chunk of money, like a credit card, swipe it, you get a big couple new roads, and then you're just paying it off over and over again. There's SADs for certain roads. I don't know if that's something that's been expressed. It's something that other municipalities do for roads that are either private or unimproved, or when residents actually petition it because they want that done. There's a way that the village would contribute 10-20%, residents would pay the rest of it to do an improvement to a road. And then there's others such as grants and principal forgiveness loans. Grants out there are few and far between for roadway improvements in smaller, not a lot of traffic, not a lot of accident type roads. Those roads that get a lot of money are the ones that have a lot of accidents, have a lot of traffic on them, because the governments want to give money to those people that are most affected, essentially. There are a couple that we're exploring for smaller communities, and we can continue to do that, but there's no problem, especially for a non-overburdened type community like the Village of Bingham Farms. But still, the biggest thing is, and I wrote at the bottom is, even though you get them done, they still need to be maintained once they're improved. However, once you maintain or once you improve them, the cost for maintenance decreases, and that's where you want to get to, where your cost of maintenance is as low as you can get it, essentially. And then back to the level of service and the expectations. You know, what are you willing to pay for? Essentially, it's really the big question. And we can go through, I know you guys want to do a question and answer, I think it's at the end of the presentation, but okay, so here's a couple of the options. So we got the total reconstruction option, which is, you know, tearing everything out, putting a brand new, full aggregate base, full new pavement section back, drainage, all that stuff. That's a really expensive option. There's a pulverize and shape and pave, which is you take the existing material that's there, you crush it all up, grind it all up into like an aggregate base, and then you pave on top of that. It's a good option because you're not having to haul materials out, which is expensive. The issue with that is you're raising the level of your road. Okay, what that does is every single driveway that's attached to it now has to be reconstructed as well, or have a big lip, which residents don't like. Concrete driver coaches and stuff that are attached to your asphalt road have to be totally rebuilt. So that gets really expensive on all the ancillary. So it's a cost-effective roadway solution. All the ancillary stuff makes it the whole project kind of expensive. You got the mill and overlay option, which is good because you just take, you know, an 1.5 or 2 inches off of the asphalt. It gets rid of the deteriorated surface asphalt, you know, from the sun and the beating that it takes from salt and cars and stuff. You strip that and you put all new surfaces back. That's great because you can match driveways and things like that. Problem is it doesn't improve any underlying issues, any cracking that's down below from poor soils. Those will just migrate right up back through within a year or two, a lot.
Could I ask, is the total reconstruction, is that the one that on the handout that we have, is that the long-term rehabilitation?
No,
one?
that was the original, and from the April 2022 estimates that we put together, the original high price option was the full reconstruction, the $17 million option. The $12 million option on the November 2023 estimates were more of a major rehabilitation, which is kind of just peeling all the asphalt off, not just the first layer, but all of the asphalt off, fixing the underlying subsoil and base issues, and then repaving a new 4 or 5 inches of asphalt on top of that. So you can see how that gets really expensive.
Okay, so I'm just trying to like,
That's the 14.8. It's the 14.8.
12, the 12 point,
It's 14.8 here, it says 14.830.
in the materials that we have are from the November.
oh yeah, so if it was all. Yes, that's if everything was a long-term, everything was a major rehab, yeah. not
Okay, so
the
that's the total reconstruction option, you're talking about this long-term rehab, is that?
The
right?
long-term rehab is a major rehab, it's not a reconstruction.
Okay,
So the reconstruction would be upwards in the $20 million
so
range.
so total reconstruction is not even on that.
Not even,
chart.
no, we don't feel that you need to do it, or do you want to? Because a lot of these roads they're old gravel roads. Right, and they were built and they create a crust over the poor soils that are underneath, so they're essentially bridging that.
Okay, all I was really trying to do was like, trying to figure out which of those is long-term rehab and which of them is selective.
So unfortunately, we should have probably had another bullet right in here that said major rehabilitation, which is what that far right column is in your
Okay,
summary
then-
sheet.
The pulverized and the mill overlay, that would be selective rehabilitation?
That would be selective rehabilitation for, I believe the only road where there was 2 roads that actually, that's a preventative maintenance kind of short term. It's more on the higher end, short term improvements, but it's not quite a major rehab. So it fits in just under the major, it goes like total reconstruction, major rehab, then this pulverize and cap is just below that major rehab, and then you get into the like mill and overlays and into the lower end or the higher end capital maintenance or capital preventive maintenance solutions. You get your mill and overlay, you get your cape seals and things like that, micro surfaces.
So none of the cost we have here is any major rehabilitation.
No, there's so
None of this is reconstruction.
none of this is reconstruction.
None of it is so
Correct.
the core samples, we don't really need to look at those anymore because none of that is gonna affect going down to
So
the subsoil.
based on the core samples, we came to the conclusion that total reconstruction of these roads is not necessary, any of them.
So we don't need to worry about.
So we
the
don't even,
samples.
we don't need to worry about that, that was bore out by those, and that's why we want to take these cores, we want to make sure that major reconstruction option was not needed, which is good.
So even though there was some yellow roads there with the subsoil, we're still okay with the way it is because they were originally gravel roads.
Correct.
They have good cap on them.
So we can
It
get by with
distributes
the
the
major
loads.
rehabilitation
Okay,
on some of those roads and do some base repairs. Now, the base repairs might be a little bit more, a higher percentage of the total road, which will bring the costs up, because once you tear all that asphalt off, there'll be some soft spots. Right, and those soft spots need to be fixed, so soft spots are what are causing the cracking up to the surface. So once we peel everything off, we can find those soft spots a lot easier, fix those soft spots and then pave everything back, and then add some drainage too, which will help drain the water from underneath the roads. Because that water will sit there within 2-3 feet of the road surface, and during a harsh Michigan winter, you get frost down that deep. So it'll freeze, it'll expand, freeze thaw, roads don't like that.
And you get bird baths too, you know what that is? right?
Yes.
And how much contribution to road deterioration do you give to snow plowing? Because there's a pile of gravel on Britton Court, almost in front of my house, that was left by a snowplow.
So salt definitely
Salt, yeah, for sure.
deteriorates roads, but I mean, plowing and scraping off the surface, that it affects the top layer there, where then once you scrape off and you create a potential for, because when you pave, it's kind of seals everything, right? So the more you scrape and scrape and scrape stuff, the more you allow sunlight, you allow salt, you allow things to get into that top surface to allow that surface cracking, which happens, all right? The major cracking is when it comes from below. That's the bad cracking that you don't really want. Surface cracking happens, and that's where you can do these preventative treatments where you kind of rejuvenate that top layer, kind of. So snow plowing, I would say, would have a minimal effect in terms of the blade scraping the top of the road surface. It would probably be just a minimal effect. If you do a good, capital preventative maintenance program, you can fix all that stuff pretty well.
Thanks.
A number of the residents, I live on Bingham Lane, a number of the residents on Bingham Lane complain of drainage issues.
Mhm.
You're talking about draining underneath the pavement and the soil to, I guess, provide a better long-term road condition. Do you do anything along the properties themselves, small ditches, culverts? Is that all part of this rehabilitation as
So-
well? Because we moved here in 2006, not to challenge you when you
No.
said it was 84 the last time it was done, but they redid, Bingham Lane was, I don't know if it's a total reconstruction, but it was certainly a big rehabilitation. They took the pavement up and put new pavement down in 2007,
Bingham Lane.
Bingham Lane.
Okay, so,
And a lot of the drainage problems that our neighbors complain about were created in 2007.
okay, so we only have plans
Yeah.
from 1984, 1992. And then some patching so anything that we didn't start in the village until 2014,
Okay.
12, 14, 15, 12, somewhere in there.
So it might have been- was it 84 when they actually paved Bingham Lane?
That was the first surface thing.
Yeah, it was
And
just gravel.
The other
Yeah.
roads were resurfaced from somewhere between 2003 to 2013.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if something was done there and we don't have plans for
Well,
it,
that's okay.
yeah, we don't.
So back to
we
the
don't
real
know.
question is, do you deal with just drainage? but-
So private property drainage obviously doesn't affect the road. 'Cause,
Right, that's the point.
so we really, and then private property drainage is a whole nother issue, it's a property owner's issue. Ditch drainage, getting close to ditch, if it stays far enough off the road, typically we like to keep it on a one-on-one. So if your edge of road is, if your ditch is 2 feet lower than the road, as long as it's more than 2 feet off the road, it's not gonna affect the integrity of the road. What happens is underneath the road, 2 to 3 to 4 feet underneath it, with clay soils, clays drain sideways, they don't drain down. So the water just kind of sits in these layers. By improving drainage on roads, which would help, yes, you can put an under drain type system, which is essentially like a French drain. You drop it on the edges of each road that cuts off those layers, those horizontal layers, and it drops it vertically into a pipe that can carry it away. And that's kind of sucks all the water underneath the roadway. It would help the ditch drainage as well. You can kind of put structures on it to help it. So there's a lot, but that's a lot of work that's not associated, it's associated with the road, that's not on the road surface. You
There's gonna
know,
be a lot of questions of the neighbors is, do our drainage problems to solve? So,
they can,
yeah, but,
You know,
but don't do this.
Is that, is that the drainage all in these quotes here?
so in the major rehab one, we do have some drainage improvements in,
Just
so we have a little bit, you can see there's, it's called miscellaneous drainage improvements, the line item in these estimates. However, again, we didn't deep dive into what's really necessary, so we made some assumptions. You know, with the lower cost option, we did less drainage improvements, because we're not really changing any elevations or doing any road cuts or anything like that. For the more major rehab option, we had a little bit more drainage improvements, because now we can start doing, we can do cross culverts, we can do more, you know, big digging, things like that, because the contractors that do these work, the contractors that do the surface type rehab work don't dig. Right, they're doing road type work. The ones that do more of the major rehab work where they're tearing off will do more underground work. That's what they're kind of set up for. So we added more drainage improvements into that. So that's, we had to make assumptions when we did this because we didn't have all the information. You know, so
Does the drainage fall under the authority of the WRC?
Brad, if I might,
there's certain, there's certain drains that go through the village
Mhm.
that are under the jurisdiction of WRC, but surface drainage like that, no.
so if you were to look at your estimate number 1A, this is,
So everyone has a 1A and a 1B.
right, just look at 1A, and I'll call your attention to
For Bingham
items.
Lane?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, items 14, 15, and 16. And you
Yes.
can see that there's ditch clean out, under drain, subgrade, open grade, and under drain clean out. And if you follow it over to the side, to the right side, you'll see the estimated costs of what those would be. That's a much more involved reconstruction than simply estimate number 1. And with those, so the cost of the drainage stuff is included in the more involved or more expensive.
In the longer term, that's why it's a longer
Right.
term rehab, because again, you fix the drainage, you
And that's-
essentially extend the life of your pavements.
And that is, you'll find that throughout these estimates.
Yeah, so you can see, like, if you compare 1A to 1B, 1A is the crack sealing and the surface seal treatment. It has ditch clean out in there, but if you look at the item 17, 18, there's zeros there. We didn't include any under drain, we didn't include any under drain cleanouts. And the miscellaneous drainage improvements were, I guess they were,
It's 1 and 1,
Substantial
it's
enough,
1
but-
and 1A.
yes,
Yes,
one and 1A, not 1A and 1B.
Yes,
So one on Bingham Lane is slurry seal,
Correct.
and that's just, what is that like? Putting a.
Putting a coat of paint, you know, a nice thick coat of paint on top of
Is it
your road.
Like a chip seal, or what is it?
It's a chip seal, so a slurry seal is similar to a chip seal, except for the chips are kind of in the slurry already, so it's just a one pass type option, where your cape seal is, you put the slurry seal on, then you add more chips to it, and then you put another layer of slurry on top of that to seal the chips in. So
Is
it's
that what's underneath there, the 21, 22, 23? That's their aggregate that goes on the top.
21, no, that's for the asphalt, that's for patches, so you can see so your ultimately, there's gonna be areas that have failed or failing or cracked. We're gonna wanna fix those too before we, coat
So
everything.
those
right.
are areas where you take out and replace the.
Correct. It's like if you were gonna recoat your deck and you had a bad board, right, like that was rotted. You're not gonna coat over it, you're gonna take that board out, fix that board, and then coat over everything. It's kind of what that option is. It's like if you're recoating your deck, whereas the major rehab is if you're like refacing your deck, you're taking all the boards off and you're putting all new boards on, and then you're coating it up. More like in terms of that.
Yeah, that's just taking the pavement off, fixing the aggregate. When you're fixing those areas, you're taking the pavement off.
You're taking the pavement and the aggregate, we're digging all the way down and fixing, because again, if the road failed, it's not just the pavement's fault.
Right.
Underneath it is, so you take the pavement off, you dig down probably 12 inches, 18 inches.
Out of curiosity, Ken, have we ever done that here? Have we been doing that, fixing those bad areas where you take it all the way down, dig out the aggregate and rebuild the base back up? Is that part of the maintenance
Well,
plan?
we've only, well, since I've been here, we've only had one of those projects, but Kathy actually would probably be able to answer that better than I would. If you care to, Kathy.
Well, we've had several different road projects over the years, and some went deeper and were more invasive into the base, but others were just a mill and resurface, so they just.
My specific question was that, identifying the areas, they're visually identified because they're the poor areas by the Pazer on it, right?
Well, actually, we identified those just from driving it. The Pazer rates the entire road stretch.
Yeah, but it.
Right, so it doesn't take into consideration
It's a visual
the visual
identification.
So you can see here in 2016, so again, I can only track kind of what
Right.
we've done since we've been here, but we have some historical stuff too, so obviously we're missing a big gap in here of things that you said you've done, but we have no record of, so it'd be great to, who knows who has that, it'd be great to find that.
We could spend the day, I don't,
Okay.
it's a matter, let me just interrupt and say, when Brad comes to the office, it costs us money. Okay, so, and I'm not picking on him, I understand, this is how it works. We could spend the day, you and I, and or someone else from the firm, going through the files, and look, there's all kinds of past road projects with the documentation, you see, the books that I'm talking about. We've got all kinds of those in the file room, and so we could do that. But it depends on how much history you feel you need. Or this
Maybe I
board
can-
feels it
Maybe I
needs.
can clarify why I'm asking the question,
Okay.
and that will help.
Okay.
So if we have done that in the past, 2016 or whatever, going back, how has it held up?
So we've done on Bingham Road. I think we did some on Bristol Lane too. That's all that we've done these road patches on. So we did 2,200 square yards in 2020, and we did about 1,000 square yards in 2016. So we can go drive them, and you can see that I think they've held up pretty well. You should still be able to see them. They are the newer looking pavement, and we can
Well,
go
I
through
live
and
on,
find the
I
stretches.
live on Bristol Lane, and I remember when I'm retired now, but I do remember, I wasn't home a whole lot, but I do remember they came in and they did the milling. And I think they milled down like 2 inches and then they paved over the top of it, but I never saw them go right down the aggregate, replace the aggregate.
So what we would do is we would visually find the spots, mark them out. We would dig down. The pavement, if the base was solid, we didn't need to dig it up. It was more of a pavement issue. It wasn't a sub base issue. So that's kind of the first thing, is we would locate all these spots and we mark them out. And we'd have the contractor come with their mill or however they wanted to take off the asphalt. We would have an inspector there, or I think Tom Mesler was there a bunch when he was working with the Village of Beverly Hills, and we would inspect the base once the asphalt was pulled to see, they would run some trucks over it and say, was it pumping or heaving or anything like that? If it was still solid, then we determined it was just a pavement issue, so we just paved right on top of it, put new pavement back. If they ran over it and it started squishing and pumping, then we would take it out. So we wouldn't needlessly take good base out. So
Okay,
that's how that kind of worked.
so there's a couple areas.
A couple areas,
You
yeah.
could tell us where they're at and we could go look at it, right?
Yeah. Can give you an approximate, you'd be able to see them. I don't know how good of our records are in terms of,
Well, the latest one, I certainly could find
you can
that.
see it. We kind of just said, how many square yards did you dig up? We didn't, kind of do as-built drawings. That's exactly where, because they're on the surface, you should be able to see it.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
So this is kind of a tracking spreadsheet that we wanted to get started. You can see this 1984 program, this is kind of what happened. And then just pretty much patching all the records we have, we're just patching after that. Essentially. Back here.
When you talked about Tom Mesler, were we also working in conjunction with Beverly Hills and some of those?
Yes, so you actually got a nice economy of scale out of that by joining with the Village of Beverly Hills program. So if you try to do a program yourself, only spending, I don't know how much money those programs were worth, but only spending, $100,000 or so, the costs tend to be higher per unit when you have a smaller job. So when we were able to get a big job and team with the Village of Beverly Hills to do that, you were able to get a better economy of scale price.
Can you give us an estimate of where, is there a sweet spot on the economy of scale for a job? Like, what's the minimum before, where it kind of flats
It
out?
really depends on the bidding climate. Honestly, you might have a small contractor that has some time in the schedule, then you probably get a good price. But if they're all booked up and you're trying to squeeze something in for the year, it doesn't matter how
Well,
big or small the project
I
is.
could imagine that today, with all of the federal funds out there and everybody being really busy, it would be tough now, but in a normal climate, like
I don't know if there's a sweet spot. I know there's someone like these Cape Seal options, there's really one or two contractors in the state that actually do that. So I know their sweet spot was they need at least like a $200,000 to $300,000 contract just to even make it worth for them to show up on the job site. Again, there might be a small contractor, but we do have qualifications, so you need to be a sufficiently capable contractor to do the work as well. So we don't want a parking lot contractor coming out and fixing your roads, right? So that's a really tough question. I don't know if there's a sweet spot. We try and get it as high as we can, up in the $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 range is where we want to be at a
You're
minimum.
answering my question, right? It's in the, it's a few hundred.
Yes, yes,
Basically.
yes.
It's not in the millions, it's in the few hundred thousand.
Yeah, if you can get you'll find a smaller person. Like I said, these ones were, in the 50 to 60 range, but that's because you joined on to the Beverly Hills one, which is probably a $300,000, $400,000 contract. So in all, that was a $450,000 contract for that contractor.
Okay.
And that's gonna be your minimum. You don't wanna go much lower than that, or you're gonna really either get really high prices.
Yeah.
Or get a non-qualified contractor.
How should we think about how much life is left in the roads, right? So before they really deteriorate. So we do the do nothing option versus the maintenance, 150,000 a year. How much time do we really have? I mean, is it a year, 2 years?
I mean, it's more, these roads have been deteriorating. That curve that we gave you didn't really do it justice. These roads, because they're old gravel roads and they're on pretty sturdy subgrades, they will deteriorate slower. Right, so you do have some years left, but you're gonna be dealing with more cracking and, it's just gonna get worse, right? It's not gonna get better, it's gonna get worse. But because of the subgrade that you guys have and that crust that you guys have, it's probably gonna be a little bit slower. So you might have some time.
So what the fix is gonna be overall, it's like a Chinese menu, you've got column A, column B, column C, it's not all just column
And
A.
that's how we would like it. That's how you get the best bang for your buck, right? You don't need to do the Cadillac option on a road that just needs a Honda.
Right.
Or Chevy, sorry,
Well, we're an automotive.
or Ford, sorry, I don't wanna.
Any car's fine.
As long as you do point A, point B, right? So yes, that's kind of what we want. We want to say, okay, and that's what kind of Bill did. He went through it. If you look at the estimates, he gives pretty direct rehabilitation options for each of these. Like some of them, he says slurry seal, some of them he says Cape Seal, some of them he says mill and overlay. And that's not just by chance, right? He went out there and he looked at the surfaces and he determined based on the surface, based on the pavement cores, what he feels would be the best use of village funds to extend the useful life of the road.
But let's say we need tape seal, but we can't hit that bogey number that the contractor needs. Can we combine with Beverly Hills when they do a
Mine
project?
with Beverly Hills, we're doing one right now, actually, in the spring. There's a couple other cities that we're trying to work. I know I work with Keego Harbor. We're trying to do something. They're in the same boat you guys are, where they only got, $60,000, $70,000 a year. So yes, we can definitely do some kind of as needed services shared, program.
So full disclosure, that picture on the right-hand side,
Yeah,
my house is on the right-hand side. So
totally on purpose, I swear.
Can we just do that section? So that's in front of my house.
Yeah.
Hey, a question, there's a lot of private roads in Bingham Farms. Why is that? Maybe that's not a road guy, or is that?
No, that's not a me question.
All
I
right,
don't
so
know why
maybe I
that
just-
happened.
I don't really have an answer for you either.
Okay.
Anyone with a more historical perception here as to why
Do
that
you
was?
want it?
Maybe not, I'll talk.
You can talk.
I'll call you.
We'll talk later.
Um, But one other, and again, maybe it's not a fair question, because we have friends in Bloomfield Township, we have friends in Bloomfield Village, we have friends in Birmingham, we walk, we go visit. You know, it's kind of like you said before, it must be what the residents want to tolerate, because we're in very nice neighborhoods in other villages around here, and the roads are absolutely good. So, I mean, you work in lots and lots of villages, is that what you see? Just people just say, I'm not going to pay for decent roads?
Well, that
even
one
though my
chart that I
taxes
showed
are-
you was I think the Phillipsburg Farms was an average of 3.5.
Yeah.
I think Beverly Hills was 3.9. That's around where everything is.
I'll tell you, some of it's
You know,
terrible.
some of it is worse and they
Much
drag it
worse.
down, but there's some that, it's just it's asset management. Right, and that's really why, a lot of people are driving that home now. It's been the buzzword for the last probably 5 years, asset management. How much do you need to spend every year to maintain?
Can you go back to the slide, the maintenance slide?
This one?
No, not this options, but you had one that showed the cost
This
of
one?
it, this one here.
Yeah.
So this formula that the state has that says it should, for 5.5 miles or 5.12 miles of road. That would be 150,000 a year to maintain.
To maintain that, to
After-
maintain that 3.5 road rating.
To maintain that 3.5, that's where we're at right now.
Yeah.
So we should only spend $150,000 a year.
If you're good with a 3.5 rating, if you're good for your roads to be exactly how they are right now and don't want to improve them, you could get by, but again, it's $150,000 a year of improvements every year.
$150,000.
And it may slow down that
Yeah.
curve, but it's still gonna be on the.
So,
No,
I mean,
it's-
Ken, do you know how much
it's-
you spent the last 3 years on road maintenance?
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
You're referring to all the potholes?
No, I'm talking improvements, like doing
Oh,
surface treatments, doing crack sealing, doing mill and fills.
I'd have to look at the 2021 project that we did.
Yeah, it's not very much.
But that would be preventative maintenance. I would call it like.
That's
preventative.
where we want to get to. We want to get to the preventative. You might have to save
Well,
up.
I mean, that 150,000 would be spent, like you say crack seal, that's a preventative
Yes,
measure.
that's perfect.
Like filling a pothole is like
That's not,
not preventative,
Right.
it's reactive.
That's
right?
reactive.
So the 150,000 would be crack seals, story seal, whatever, filling the cracks or doing whatever it takes to reduce the water intrusion for the freeze thaw cycles, things like that, right?
Yeah, and you could crack seal the entire village for less than $150,000. So you're gonna need to save up some, I mean, it's a dollar amount, thinking that you're gonna save up to reconstruct some of these or major rehab some of these roads that really need it, that you can't, provide preventive maintenance
No,
for
I
and make it better.
understand, you
So-
explained very well that we would maintain the 3.5 rating, so it would look essentially the same, but it just wouldn't deteriorate.
Deteriorate.
You would flatten the curve out, basically.
Again, it's just a plug and chug number that they give,
It's-
theoretically, you probably wouldn't be able to spend $150,000 a year in preventative maintenance because your roads are so deteriorated that you don't have, you can't find that many roads. You'd just be throwing your money away essentially if you try to do preventative maintenance on a road that's too far deteriorated. If you know what I mean.
But that
So they
was-
really want you to save up that money to do a major rehab.
That's what I was asking. So if we spend this 150,000, eventually we're gonna have to reconstruct the roads or at least do a major rehab, right?
Yes.
So is it 2 years away, 3 years away? We don't know.
I wish I had a crystal ball. I'd probably be in a better position than I am right now.
But I guess we could just use history, because these roads have been paved, they last about 20 years, basically, according to. Right, what you gave us here, Ken.
Mhm.
When they get repaved, they last 20 years.
that's the rough estimate. An asphalt road has a 15,
We can
20-year
fix the base
lifespan.
issues. You put a new asphalt road on it, you can get 20 years out of it.
20 years, and then there will be spots that, that probably have poor subsoil or something that should have been fixed or whatever.
Well, hopefully we'll fix them all when we go through it, but if after 5 years on that brand new road, you start your crack sealing program, you start looking at potentially doing a slurry seal, something that's, you can get done relatively cost effectively, that 20 will move to 30. You can extend that life more significantly if you catch all that stuff early. As soon as water starts getting into your subspace and things like that, that's where you start getting problems. So if you can prevent that right off the bat, keep that surface nice and impervious, shut everything off, the better you're off, is just getting to that point. You know, like if in 1984, in 1989, they would have done a Cape Seal program, started Cape sealing everything, and then done a crack sealing, you know, after that, every 5 years had a big program, your roads would most likely be in better shape than they are right now. It's just that asset management was not a thing in the 80s and 90s.
Brad, the estimate for cost increase year by year is about 4%.
I think we said 4% before is a good number to use.
And that 4% though, it's so 4% in 1 year would be like $360,000, and then for the second year, it's 4% of the 9 million plus the $360,000, right? I mean,
Yeah.
It keeps
compounds.
great compound.
Yeah, it's not gonna get cheaper. You know, unless, you know, we strike oil somewhere and we don't have to buy oil anymore, you know, for the asphalt. But I mean, unless something, you know, really drastic happens.
So can I just kind of ask, like, one that you showed us here, number one, which is a slurry seal on Bingham Lane,
Yes,
right? And that's the rehabilitation, the total cost is $569,000.
it's a total cost, yep.
Yeah, the slurry portion can't really tell what it is, because I see the slurry seal is just 43,000.
Yes.
I'm not sure. what all
So that's where we get into what are the expectations of the village? If you wanted to go in and just say, listen, we're not touching a driveway, we're not touching drainage improvement, we're not doing any base repairs. We want we want you to come in, we want you to seal all the cracks, we want you to put slurry seal on it, you can get that a lot cheaper. You know,
And
So
then
that's
what
where
would
the-
happen if we did that, would that arrest the 4%? Would that defer that 4% degradation?
there's not, the 4% was an increase in cost.
Yeah, that's what I mean, but basically what we're saying is we would defer needing to do a major rehabilitation on a road. I'm just trying to understand.
Would you extend the useful life of the pavement a little bit?
Yeah.
5 year?
A little bit. I mean, because you're
Because
still,
we're not gonna be able to raise this much money in a tiny little village and do all this in the next 2 years. It's gonna be impossible. It's just impossible, I think.
I agree.
Unless you have a bond.
Even if you had a bond, you wouldn't be able to get all the roads ripped up in 2 years. It'd be
Correct.
impossible.
Well, you mean the. time.
Physically, you couldn't do it.
Physically, you couldn't do it. You need a year for design, you need two years plus for construction. Yeah, I mean, it's gonna take some time. So that's where we come in and selectively do a program. We kind of talked about this last time where you kind of build out. So like if you're doing a program, maybe you do, Bristol Court, Sacred Court, Brittner Court, right, first, and the next year do Bristol Lane, work your way out of that cul-de-sac. You would do Bingham Lane as one, you would do Shagwood and
Yeah, I get it. It's-
those, and work your way out, and then,
Yeah, it's
So
gonna take years.
it would be
and years to do
phases.
that,
It'd be
I understand,
phases for
but
sure.
All I'm asking is there a way to, if you're gonna work out, one of the worst roads is Bingham Lane, or Bristol Lane, you said, and Brittner Court is not Bristol Lane, so you're gonna have to defer that. Is there options just to do a slurry seal, crack seal, slurry seal, and then, defer that major rehabilitation for, until we built up funds, like 5, 6, 7 years down the road?
you can, well, you're not fixing the inherent issue with the road, right? But
Completely
so
understand.
if you want to spend the money to do that, knowing that you're not really fixing anything, you're putting a coat of paint on a rotted board, then sure.
But
can
we
do
have good subsoil. You said we have good aggregates, that you have a hard crust layer there. I understand.
Yeah.
But we're just trying to preserve until we can get the funds to do the rest of that particular road.
So.
And we just let that road go. You're saying let that road go 5, 6, 7 years until we can get to it and not do anything.
Yes, you can do that,
I'm just trying.
but you're gonna be running, if you're doing the other roads, you're gonna be running construction traffic over that road, so you're gonna have loads on that road that you're not used to seeing, because it is a low traffic road, right? I know you got a lot of homes being built in there, so you're used to a little bit more traffic, but
Yeah.
you're going to deteriorate that road faster by constructing those roads that are off of it. But will it extend it? Yes, if you do something to it, it's gonna extend it. But doing a Cape Seal type project on Bristol Lane versus Brooks Lane, Brooks Lane, you're gonna extend that pavement life a lot longer than you would on Bristol Lane. So your bang for your buck, if you would say, would be more on Brooks
It's on
Lane
the
for the same type of
tributaries,
treatment.
Not on the main flow, it's on the tributary.
No, I'm saying Brooks Lane is in good shape, so you're
Yeah.
catching it before it gets too far down, so you're bang for your buck there. It's gonna be much more effective than it is on a Bristol Lane or one of the roads that is in worse shape that we don't recommend doing a, you know, surface type treatment.
Got it.
So,
So that makes sense, as long-winded about this.
so the,
Understand.
what we've been tasked to do is to come back with between 3 to 5 options for the council to consider in terms of how to proceed. So based on previous questions, I understand that we want whatever we do to be in chunks of at least $200,000 to get like bang for your buck. One of the options that I've heard people say was just like, if we had all the money, just do it all at once, like do a bond and do everything at once. I think I heard you say that you probably couldn't do it in 1 year. Is that correct?
You couldn't do the work, I mean, we could design it and you could bid it out to a contractor and say this is gonna, you know, you can only work from, you know, April till October. And then whatever you don't finish, you gotta, you know, do the next year. And you might have to put some kind of escalator for costs, if costs rise, you know, if you have a program that's too big, it can't be done in one construction season, then there's contractors might like it because they're like, okay, we got work for 2 years now, but they also don't know what the future materials costs might be, so you have to kind of write that in for them to allow them to, if they can prove that costs have gone up, you know, that you can mark that in there, but you can design and put the whole contract out for fixing every road in the village if you want. You can.
But I think what you're telling me though is that if we do the selective rehab for 8.9 and we do, you know, everything you guys have suggested there, that would take more than 1 year, right, to physically. do
Yes,
it.
to physically construct, yes.
You can't do 5 however
2
many.
miles,
however
5.12
many
miles.
we have.
Yeah.
Well, that's not an option that we should even really be considering in terms of doing it in 1 year. It has to be spread over.
If you tell the contractor he's gotta do it, then you're gonna get a big contractor with multiple crews and it's gonna be a, you know, it's gonna be a war zone in here. And it's gonna be a high price, you can get it done, but, you know,
Okay, I mean, that.
you can do anything, but
And
I
that's-
would suggest that you phase it out based on rehab type.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to get at, as to like what we should sort of like be thinking about in terms of like options, and that's, I think is helpful.
The options that you are tasked to come up with also include timelines.
Right,
So
exactly, that's sort of what I'm getting at. Why is Bristol Road the worst? Do you give any idea? I mean, is it the subsoil or is it?
I mean, the soils are bad underneath it, it's got poor drainage. I mean, it gets close to the river, you get down at the south end, so it just lends itself to poor soils.
Is it gonna be the worst even when we do, I mean, is there any way to make it so it isn't the worst 20 years from now when?
If you wanna do a total reconstruction, you might make it better, but you know, if you just put a road on, if you have bad subsoils, you have bad subsoils. You know,
Okay,
you're not hogging all that out of there.
But if you did the major rehabilitation and you had the asset management, it would last a lot longer,
Yes,
right? So it would go longer than 20 years, basically, is what you're saying.
yes.
But it's gonna cost you on a year-to-year basis.
It costs you a little bit more on a
But
year-to-year
if you do
basis.
it, if you do the,
But
if you're good at doing your crack seal and whatever else, then you reduce the amount of,
extend the life.
extend life, you reduce the amount of erosion due to water, sun, all that stuff, right?
yeah, like you do like a life cycle cost now, so it's like, yeah, if you do a total reconstruct, your road might last 30 years, but if you do a total rehab, you know, major rehab is gonna last 20 with preventative maintenance. You'll be at the same spot in 30 years at a much cheaper cost.
one question I've had from residents who have seen your reviews has to do with the contingencies that you have built in here, and it's, some residents seem to think that 25% is high. And I don't know enough to say, I know like back when I did construction loans, there was a contingency, but it wasn't 25%. How do you come up with that, just 25%?
So
I know it's
typically-
an estimate, but how do you come up with that?
It's a fair question. So we typically do our contingency in stages. So when we're at a concept stage where we're just like, you say, hey, like we were in like April of 2022. Like, hey, we got this plan, let's let's re-roll the roads. I want you to do estimates right now without looking at it. I'll give you the square footages. Okay, we would typically put more of a 35 to 40% contingency on that. We have no information about anything. During this preliminary stage, where we have a little bit of information, we don't have topo, we don't know all the drainage issues, we don't know all the fixes. It's still underground construction, you know, there's still a lot of unknowns about it. That's where we put in this 25% because we don't have all the information yet. As we go through design and get to a biddable set of plans where we have all the topographic survey, we've gone out and done all the investigations that we need to do, got all the permitting that we need to do, we will drop it down to a 10% contingency for construction. So it's kind of an iterative process. The more information we get about a project, the lower that contingency falls.
Okay, when you've done other projects for other places, when, at this stage, if you have 25%, does it normally end up being 25%? Does it? Or does it,
Well, typically when we
sometimes
put,
it's more and sometimes it's less?
so typically we put together an estimate right here. We have, you know, how many pay items were in this? In these estimates, 29, 24, somewhere in there. Typically, when we go through a job and bid a job out, we're up to like 50 pay items. So that's in where a lot of that contingency is. A lot of small stuff like, you know, we did put like mailboxes to be replaced in here, or, you know, Mrs. Johnson has a stone driveway that has sprinklers that need to be fixed, and, you know, all these things that just kind of grow as you do a project, and that's where that contingency kind of covers. So when we put a plan set out to bid, we always, and when it comes in, when the contractor comes in with the cost, we always ask the municipality to give a 10% contingency on top of that, so that we have some room during construction if an unknown occurs and something happens, or, hey, you know, they uncovered this and it's a lot worse than we thought. You know, we estimated, you know, 500 square yards of undercut. It's gonna be like 600 or something, you know, that we have some room to authorize the contractor to do without having to come back to council every time there's a change or an overage.
So there's potential that if we paid you to do the engineering work to create the statement of work for the, to go out to bid, then this cost could come down.
Yes. Especially if we start, you know, there's a lot of as needed quantities in there as well, because we don't know what we're gonna run into. And if you guys choose to reduce the scope, you know, we put pretty much everything we could think of in there. We have a lot of driveway replacements and things like that, that if you're just doing a cape seal, you may not wanna, you may say, no, we're not touching any driveways. Driveways are homeowner responsibility, we're not touching those. Well, that's gonna bring a lot of those items down, you know, say, hey, again, we don't wanna do any undercuts. We would never recommend that, but, you know, any base repairs. So you say, we don't wanna do any of those. We just wanna put a coat of paint on our road. We'll say, okay, if that's what you wanna do, that's what we do. That'll bring down the scope and that'll bring down the cost. So we have some ways to
Yeah.
maneuver in these numbers.
So this is more of an engineering estimate than it is a real study at this point.
Right. It's an engineering estimate. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We put effort into it. There are a lot of assumptions in it because
Yeah.
we just don't.
Yeah. But you mean you didn't
We
go
don't know.
out and, you know, do the detailed
No,
study on the
we've
road?
not done the design yet.
So
No.
like, when you go out and do the detail analysis, you'll identify all the areas that might have to have the pavement taken up to examine the sub base, right?
We will give we'll give an estimate based on what we can see on the surface, right? That's all we can see.
Right.
But we'll have topographic survey that has all the drainage and what might need to be fixed, where we might be digging up for culverts. We'll work with you guys on how much drainage improvements you wanna do on any given road. We'll identify where the drainage issues are. You know, we gotta put together all specifications, we got, you know, all that fun stuff. I have some examples too. I know there was some question on what exactly a biddable set of plans looks like. A
Shovel
spec
ready.
book looks like a shovel-ready set of plans, yeah.
So the rate here, so you explained the 25% now, there's 25% is the engineering cost.
Correct, that's total engineering, so that'd be design, and that'd be construction, engineering, and contract and administration, plus any permit fees, any geotechnical investigations that we need to do. Now, we did a lot of pavement cores already, but if we start going into doing like sewer work, like putting in drains and stuff like that, we need to go deeper to get water levels and things like that, to make sure we have the burying capacity for manholes and things like that.
So,
We don't have those capabilities, we would have to go out to another firm to do that.
so, but is this just an estimate based? It looks like it's a straightforward, because some jobs are going to be very easy, very little engineering.
Some will be less, some will be more.
So this engineering cost is an estimate too.
It's
based
an
on-
estimate, but it's a pretty good historical estimate. So we've been tracking ASC, which is the American Society of Civil Engineers, has been tracking engineering costs for over 60, 70 years now. So they came up with cost curves back in the 70s that says, okay, for a certain size project construction costs, what are your design costs typically going to be? What are your construction engineering costs going to be? And break it down. We've kind of followed that. So typically our costs fall into the 7 to 10% for design, and then 12 to 18 for construction, depending on, if we have federal funds, there's a whole bunch of rules we gotta follow in terms of paperwork, and that makes construction more expensive. And
Brad, would this number get refined if we paid you to do the engineering study, the engineering cost for each one of these?
we would typically put a proposal together. Now, these were developed based on doing each road individually.
Yeah,
So if you said, hey, we want to break this into 3 phases and break, give you this big phase, this big phase, that economy of scale would break down those engineering costs. Yes, because again, if we had to do all these roads individually, we need a spec book for each road,
right.
a lot of the same stuff. So we can group them all together. It's one spec book for all those roads. It's one set of plans, details, etc., for all those roads.
Right.
So that would come down.
That's geographic too, would you say that, right?
That's what we would recommend.
Do the engineering costs include someone on site, oversight?
Yes, on-site observation throughout construction, yes. That's a portion of that percentage. I think that's typically around between 5 and 7% of the construction cost is what observation.
Okay.
Full-time observation.
Is this, so you said like 7-10% is, I don't know if you said 7% is the design
Design
cost.
costs, yeah.
The,
Of construction, of the estimated construction costs.
yeah,
Yeah.
of the estimated construction costs. So if we paid you up front to do all the engineering, we picked a plan, you did all the engineering, that would bring the engineering cost down because we're bundling everything.
So number one,
At
we
least on
don't,
the design portion.
so we don't work on a lump sum basis. Okay, so there's no payment upfront. You only pay for what we do. So if our work doesn't go up to that, we'll give you a proposal before we do the work to say, hey, we're gonna do this, here's our schedule, here's our hours, who's gonna be doing the work, essentially what we're gonna be doing, here's our hours, here's our estimated costs, okay? If we come in and we get this job done and it turns out to be easier than we expected because we're doing less, and that, say we said it was $100,000 and our total billings for design are $60,000, you only pay us $60,000, you don't pay us 100.
So these are just not to exceed
These
numbers.
are not to exceed numbers, correct? For budgeting purposes.
Yeah.
So, in your comments in terms about maybe like grouping it, just again, keeping in mind that our goal is to come up with 3 to 5 proposals, both in terms of how to do the cost and the timing. Is there a road or a group of roads that you would do first? Is there does it occur to you that there are any sort of like groupings or anything like that we should consider?
Like I said, I think you should group the Brittner, Sager, and Bristol courts, maybe with like Brooks Lane down there or something like that. Oh, that's gonna be a different type of construction. So, never mind. Those 3 cul-de-sacs probably be a phase, and then Bristol Lane would be its own phase. Obviously, Bingham Road would be its own phase, and then you get into the Bingham Lane. You probably would pair Bingham Lane with I don't know. What was Bingham Lane? See, Bingham Lane was a surface deal. So yeah, so I would say I would put Bingham Lane and this is just off the Fromm Court and Brooks Lane together because those are all the slurry seal jobs. So you want to group all those together. And then hit the Hickory Hollow and Shagwood, because those are the mill and fill roads, and then Bingham Road on the way out.
Okay, so the courts were first.
So the Bristol courts were first, and then Bristol Lane, because again, that was one of the worst roads, so if you
Bristol Lane was
hit that
second,
earlier in the phase.
and then the third was,
And then the third would be all the surface seal ones, which is Bingham Lane, Brooks Lane, Fromm Court, and Old Orchard Trail. All 4 of those roads.
okay, and then the fourth was Bingham Road.
And then, no, you wanna hit the Hickory, yeah, I guess you could do Hickory Hollow, Shagwood, Timber Trail. Those are all mill and fills, and then last would be Bingham Road on the way out.
I thought you said we would. Can you go back to the last slide again? I misunderstood that.
Alright, I'll get out of this. There you go. Which one would you like?
The last one, I think, this one here.
This one. So these aren't in any order, I guess. These are just options.
Okay, the mill and overlays, when you say mill and fill, you're saying mill and.
Mill overlay, sorry, yeah. Sorry, that's just jargon.
Okay, so the mill and overlay is the, where you're grinding it and.
You take 2 inches off and then you put 2 inches back on.
Just, that's all you're doing.
That's all you're doing. Yeah.
You're not
Well, you're
using-
fixing, you're gonna fix, in all of these, you wanna fix any of the soft
Yeah,
areas.
yeah, yeah.
But that's what the mill and overlay is. And then, again, depending on how, again, I was trying to pick lengths of road and I kind of kept Bingham and Bristol as their own job because they're so big. As long as they're gonna be expensive project, but you could group those if you wanted a bigger project too. So you could add Bingham Road to, you know, Hickory Hollow and Shagwood and do all those at the same time if you wanted to run a little bit bigger job.
So
But
when you, HMA resurfacing is the mill and overlay?
HMA resurfacing 2 inch, yes, that's considered the mill and overlay. Again, if you're doing just the selective rehab
Got it.
type, so we're trying to group similar types of construction together.
Yeah.
And just a matter of how big a
What was
project
it?
do you
I'm
want.
sorry, what was it? Cape Seal is the same as. Slurry-
Cape Seal and Slurry Seal are gonna be the same contractor will do
Same
that work.
contractor's
Yeah.
doing that.
Yep,
And the only one that's unique here beyond that is this HMA crush and shape.
crush and shape, that would be, yes, that would be a
Which
little
one is
different.
that?
That's
up
Timber
there?
Trail
Yeah,
Road.
but which,
So the HMA resurfacing contractor will probably able to do that.
the whole thing,
Yeah.
so that's just taking the whole road up and then starting.
That's crushing everything in place and then compacting it and putting more asphalt on top of it.
That's the pulverized one.
That's the pulverized, yeah, pulverized crush and shape.
So there's one,
Similar.
in the reduced scope, there's one pulverized then,
Yeah, there's just one.
okay.
Yeah, that was the only one that we found. And that's because there's very little driveways on it. You know, so you can just raise it up and it's got, you know, it's got drainage issues on the side, so raising up is not a bad thing either.
Flip the birds over the sun.
There you go.
Brad, let me, here, I was taking notes while you were saying
Oh, gosh.
I'm just gonna throw, I'm not holding you to this,
All right.
all right, just for the sake of my own keeping this together. So number one is Sager, Brittner, and Bristol Court.
Mhm,
Number two is Bristol Lane.
mhm.
Number three is Bingham Lane, Brooks Lane, From and Old Orchard Trail.
Yep.
And number four is Hickory Hollow, Shagwood, Timber Trail,
Yep,
and then possibly five or together with those is Bingham Road.
yes.
Okay, all right. I was listening better, more than accurately than I thought I did.
And that's just off the top of my head. I just put no,
I understand.
crunch numbers to
I
it, but
get
that
it.
just kind of
Yeah,
makes,
it's just.
kind of makes sense geographically and work type.
Mhm.
That's a good summary that, well, I'm in writing.
Gonna be in the many minutes.
Would you all like this presentation? In the form of
Very
a
helpful.
PDF or
Yeah.
all right,
Yes.
make sure that you get it to me tomorrow and I'll.
No problem.
So are we looking at this as a 5-year program that you just laid out with combining the roads? Is that kind of?
You could do it 5 years, you could do it 15 years, if you wanted to have a little gaps in between to save up some money, you can do it however you want to. Depending on, you know, some of the project, some of these phases will be much cheaper than other ones too. So you may be able to combine them if you wanted to or not.
What,
Like your Cape Seal ones, those 4 Cape Seal jobs, those are gonna be, you know, a lot cheaper than your,
if we did
No, it's all type
the,
jobs.
if we did the 8 just the 8.9 or the 9 million one, what would our Paisley rating be after that?
if you did them all.
If we did the 8.996 million.
So if you did it all at once. And had all the roads, because if you phase them over 15 years, your phase rating at one point in time is gonna
Put it
be
This way, yeah,
different.
so
Say
Well,
magically, you just teleported
Let
and they were all
me-
done
let
at the same
me-
time.
Let me be more specific to the engineer. Okay. If we had 3 phases and we did, phase 1 after 2 years, phase 2 after 4 years, phase 3 after 6 years. And then we did the, maintenance plan as you had prescribed, 150,000 or whatever. What would our Paiser rating be after the first phase for the first,
After just the first phase or after
Yeah.
all those phases?
just the Paiser rating for the roads that were in phase 1? What would the Paiser rating be?
For each of those roads only? Or for the entire village?
For just the roads that were in phase 1.
Okay, so it matters which treatment you did, right? If you did the mill and overlay, and you had a brand new surface, you'd probably be in the 9-10 range, you need a brand new surface, right? If you did the Cape Seal ones first, that's probably gonna be like a 6 or a 7.
Okay, so we get up to, that's good, isn't it? Or what was
Yeah,
6 or
that's
7?
that's at the bottom of the, it's the top of the
Bottom.
fair, bottom of the good
Okay,
range. That's where that's where I would think. I would hope you would be there, depending on how many cracks you gotta seal and how many base
so
repairs you
6
get
or
done.
7 for Cape Seal, and mill and overlay is 9.
Yeah, 'cause you're on a brand new surface. The problem with mill and overlay is that it goes down pretty rapidly because you're not really fixing too many underlying, but if you keep sealing the cracks
Well,
and you keep it
I
in
said
maintenance
the
program.
8.9, which includes, going and fixing the aggregate areas where it's bad, right?
Yeah, but you'll still get reflected. I mean, you're still just
We
doing a
know it
mill and
lasts
overlay.
20 years right now. We know.
They should last, if you maintain them, have a plan to maintain them and you do a mill and overlay with base repairs, yes, they should last 20 years, if not longer.
So I guess, does anybody, Ken, or I guess question Ken about, because I haven't been to all the meetings, do we have a target that we want to be at for Paiser, or what is our
The
goal?
desired Paiser target,
Yeah.
that's never been discussed. But I think it's always a moving target, isn't
Well, it's gonna be,
it? It's what I mean. It is, well,
Yeah, so I mean, if you can stay up in this range here, that's good. You can get up and again, you'd be well beyond most municipalities around here. too.
Yeah, as I drive through the neighborhoods,
Yes,
Eric, I see the neighborhoods around here, the very affluent ones are,
Other drug,
they're 2 and 3
zero,
potholes.
almost zero. You almost can't walk in some of these roads. It's ridiculous.
well, again, some of those are probably private roads too.
Well, that was kind of the question I was
You know,
asking earlier.
Some are private, some of them,
Yeah,
some of them like it that way.
yeah.
I don't want people driving on the road,
Yeah.
right? They'll deal with it.
well, the cities that have dirt roads, they do that on purpose, right?
Yep, or some do it on purpose.
I'm gonna show my ignorance on this one, but that's never stopped me before, so. At our last meeting, someone was talking about, the fact that when the roads were done, either originally or the last time, a substance was used to make them look more, rural, or I guess was what it was called.
Assuming that would be the chip seal.
Country road look is what. we-
Country roads.
Assuming that would be the chip seal, so they're referring to.
Okay, and so these estimates, are they like with that kind of material, or are they with just regular
So
asphalt?
the ones that say Cape Seal, slurry seal on them will have that look at it. The ones that are just a mill and overlay will be black asphalt, like a parking lot,
Very smooth.
very smooth.
Okay, so the chip seal ones are that, but the regular just asphalt is not.
Because you don't wanna put, so really, the slurry is the important part, because the slurry seals everything, right? You're putting a big thick coat of paint on your roads that nothing gets down those cracks, and the chips are for traction. You just put slurry down, we slip and sliding all over the roads in the rain. So you need those chips in there to provide you traction on the roads, and it does give it like an old gravel, almost an old gravel road type of look to it.
Franklin just repaved a bunch of roads and it's black.
Yeah.
Now, you can pay to put something in the asphalt, it's just gonna cost more
Hmm.
to make it look. Or you can also use what's called a base mix, which has larger aggregates in it. It doesn't hold up as well, because again, you get larger aggregates, the more chance you have to get voids in that and water gets in, so you want that,
It gets loose.
it gets loose, you want that slop, they want that solid black look, you want that fresh coat of paint there that just pushes everything off and doesn't crack and get inside.
Brad, could you spend a few minutes talking about the importance of drainage and under drains and all of that kind of thing? I know, and what you're working on as far as that stormwater management plan, or what Andrew is working on.
Mhm.
Can you spend a few minutes discussing that? And I don't want that to be lost in this.
Yes. So we got a grant through Oakland County to do a stormwater master plan for the village. And that just shows where all, I have a map of that in here too, if you want to see it afterwards, a portion of it, where we calculated up all the tributary areas, where stuff drains, where is the ultimate drainage point, how many acres, how much impervious surface is there, how much rain contribution should be coming to that point. Are the culverts sized properly? Are there low points? Are there driveway culverts that aren't working? Are there ditches that are too shallow, too deep, etc.? Hopefully figure all that out to alleviate some of the drainage issues. Now, if there's ponding back in someone's private property, that's really not for kind of us to alleviate. I guess it's something that they would have to do privately. We just need to make sure that we prepare for or design for it if they should ever relieve that and actually drain it where it's supposed to go. So what that would hopefully do was give us some areas where we can do improvements to the roads, such as cross culverts or any driveway culvert improvements, any ditching improvements, clean out things like that to make sure that water does still flow and doesn't collect on the sides of the roads for too long. So again, this is a ditch and culvert community, so water is supposed to collect in the ditches, what they're for, but we don't need them to stay there for longer than 72 hours or so. So we still want to create positive drainage. We want to create positive outlets. And that's really what the stormwater master plan is kind of for. So that would help. No standing water on the roads is less water that's infiltrating in and under roads. And hopefully during freeze thaws that helps out the roads. So there are drainage improvements that we've recommended as well. Those aren't necessarily what we need to do. We could talk about that during design, whether you want to do that. But that's essentially, like I said, putting in under drains on either side of the edges of the road to kind of collect that water that might be sitting under it, because again, it's all mostly clay and it's gonna drain out this way.
But there's no stormwater sewers in the village, right?
There are some,
There are.
there's some on Bingham
I have to-
Road.
I have to maintain that in my business, and we have to go out and collect water every time it rains and take photos. You doing that?
We don't have to collect water quality samples, if that's what you mean.
Well, it's essentially water quality, but you take a photo and you keep it on file in case the state comes by and wants to see it.
So the village does have MS4 permitting that they go through, and we help them with that, where we are monitoring their stormwater discharges to the canals and things like that to make sure there's no cross connections, there's no funny smelling, funny looking stuff coming out of their storm sewers. I think if something was like that, we would collect sample at that point, but if everything looks good, we don't need to collect samples.
Yeah, we just collect routine samples, and most of the time it's perfectly clear.
You have plans?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else, Ken?
Questions?
So
Well,
you want to talk
Kathy
about
or
what-
Joe, do you guys have questions that you'd like to ask at this point? Okay.
So I think at last meeting, someone, and again, I just heard this through the grapevine, but someone brought up what HRC's role, I guess, in this whole thing would be. We kind of went through it a little bit, but we would be the designers of the project. We would help the village bid out the project, collect the bids, review the bids, make sure that they have all the qualifications, keep the contract books in line, and then we would do full-time on-site observation. We would manage the contract. We do any construction engineering, which is if it comes up in the field, myself or one of my associates would, kind of run out there with the field observer and solve it. We don't physically do the work. The contractor, there'd be a separate contractor that would physically do the work, but we don't do that. We just observe, make sure they're doing it per the plans, making sure they're not goofing around too much, and are doing a good job for the village, making sure they're taking care of and that on-site observer would be taking care of the residents, any of their complaints that they have, making sure that traffic is maintained, all that stuff. Says, I know Ken and his staff don't have time to do that. So we try and
So when
keep all the calls on us so we don't have to bother them.
So we would pay you the design work you would create the design, you'd create the bid pack, statement of work. You'd then, work in conjunction with our treasurer to go out for the bids,
Mhm.
because we would contract that company directly.
Yes, the contract would be between the contractor and the village.
And then you would,
We have a contract with the village,
and then, so if something went wrong with the contractor, you are our delegate,
correct.
our voice to.
Owner's field representative is the term that's.
You're the quality control.
Correct. And then we will record everything, put together record drawings and stuff like that, so they're, all the stuff that where is this, where is that, we wanna make sure you guys have it, because you may not, maybe fresh in your memory now, but 10 years down the road, stuff gets lost, so having those as-built drawings are good to have, you know, exactly what went in where, what worked, what didn't work, you know, so. That's how the estimates are developed, so, we go through all of our bid tabs, you know, so we bid out this work, we have a lot of these jobs, so we bid out these work, we review all those tabs, all the contractors' bids. Not only just the lowest one, but we wanna look at like the 3 lowest, you know, to get kind of an aggregate cost of what this type of work is, and it's all very similar. So it may be called something different, but deep down, it's still, you know, you're taking asphalt off, putting asphalt on, right? Asphalt costs are pretty similar. Usually they only change based on quantity. If you have a huge quantity, you get a better cost. If you have a small quantity, you're gonna higher cost. So we take all that into consideration when we're looking at a bid tab, like how big was this job? MDOT also tracks all of their bids. MDOT is the Michigan Department of Transportation. They track all of their bids and they make those available online. So we use that tool as well to make sure we come up with our bid costs. So that's kind of how we develop our estimates. And then we use Google Maps a ton to kind of count driveways, count structures in the road to see how many structures we might have to adjust, all kinds of stuff. It's been a godsend to have that, I tell you, because before we would have to go physically out to site and walk each job to kind of get that information and hope we got it all. Or else we had to go back out there.
There's been this asphalt bid rigging scandal that we've probably all read about in the newspapers. Is there anything that you or a village can do to protect ourselves about that sort of thing? It's probably a tall order.
That's a tough,
given the
it's a
nature
tough
of
one.
it.
I mean, we
Right.
just try and put the best set of plans out that we can that provides the least chance of waiting bids. Which means like and that's why a lot of times we put these estimates on how much of a certain item we want. Because if a lot of times in the past, people would just put like 1 unit on there, thinking that a contractor would bid honestly on if that 1 unit turned into 100, you know. They'd be the same, it would cover their costs, right? No, they will weight them and say, you know, we're gonna put a ton on this because there's little quantity and we hope that there's gonna be more, or we'll bully the engineer into doing more of these because we're making a ton more profit on this item than we are this item. So we know that and we work with contractors and our observers are good and we go through it. We go through each bid when they get it, and you know, weighting a contract is part of the qualification, part of the review. Contracts are close. And one contractor has a really weird looking bid and it's a lot of money up here and a little money down here. And this other contractor is nice and even, you know, sometimes we'll recommend, we like this bid better, even though it might cost, you know, 1% more. We feel that, you know, in the long run, the village is better protected. And that would be up for you guys to say, yeah, we're going to spend that 1% more.
But as the pavement's being laid down on the roadbed, do you guys take samples?
We test it, yes.
You do, okay.
Yep, so it's rolled, and then we test in the plant. So we get samples of the material that's brought out in the truck. We go to the plant physically and take a sample of what's being put down. And we send it through a sieve and we test it all to make sure it's of the quality that we specified. And then once it's installed, they roll it and then we'll take compaction samples on it. Make sure that it's compacted properly. So that's one thing that I didn't mention, thank you. That's one thing that we do as well. Is it's called materials testing. We do the same thing with the aggregates that's put down, so we're putting down aggregate beforehand, they'll have to compact that, we can test that too.
You have a way of determining how many rocks and how much asphalt is in the aggregate?
We can sieve it if you want us to. But like Ken said, it's a cost every time you do that. It doesn't let me forget that.
Any other comments, questions?
So,
Oh, okay,
sorry,
that's all right.
but
I'm here.
43% of the total cost, even in select rehabilitation, is still those three roads.
3 major roads.
You know, Bristol Lane, Bristol Court, Britman Court, 43% of the $8.9 million.
A lot of it's Bristol Lane too.
And there's no other alternatives for that. It's completely take the asphalt up and put new asphalt.
Again, we can always say we don't want to do that, we want to do something less, and we'll just say, okay, that's fine, we can do what you want us to do. Even if it's not a recommendation. And we'll say, okay, but we'll obviously caveat it, say that we can do something less. Our worry is it's not gonna last as long as it would on a better condition road, but we can try it, that's what you
But
wanna do.
those three are the ones that are gonna get the under drain, the drainage improvements, the whole thing. They're getting the whole thing.
That's why they're,
But they're not getting the subsoil. You're not taking up the old gravel road, you're leaving that, but you're.
it's still gonna be left, but what we've done in
doing the
those
vertical
jobs.
Drain for the clay at the edges.
And we've probably assumed, if you look at the percent, we probably assumed more base repairs too. We assumed we'll be digging up more soft spots on those roads. Because we know from our pavement cores, they don't have the solid subsoils. So that's why the estimate's probably gone up too. And again, those are as needed things. We don't want to give you a budget that we're just gonna exceed. We want to give you a budget that we are under, we don't want to be too high. We don't want to spend too high, but we want to make sure that you guys have enough money to pay for this stuff.
It's the old story of what you get, what you pay for.
Yeah.
Okay, any other discussion at all? No, you're good? That's good. Okay, I guess we need a motion for adjournment.
Member
What,
You wanna go, you want the member comments,
we asked.
you're usually the members, if they have any final thoughts.
Oh, you want to go around with that?
Yeah, you always go around.
Oh. Well, you didn't have a cheat sheet. Let's go around the table.
Eric, just go ahead and count, yeah,
You want to start on that end?
well, however you wanna start, you're the chair, I'll let you pick. Right.
Jim was going. I mean, he had words coming out of his mouth.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Words are-
I apologize.
I have no comments.
Okay.
No comments.
I've got a couple here. One thing that came up earlier was that a couple of us talked together that we would be violating the Open Meetings Act. And I just wanted to get out there that if 3 or less of us get together and talk about something, for instance, could very easily happen if we have small committees that you and I work on this thing, or the 3 of us work on this type of project, that we're not violating the Open Meetings Act. So I just wanted to clarify that, just to make sure.
As long as it's less than 4.
Yes,
Yes.
yeah,
So
3 or less,
less than 4.
less than 4, yeah.
So this whole committee couldn't meet.
No, you can't just meet at someone's house, right?
But
Or,
if-
or 4 of you can't.
Right,
Or 3 of you.
But-
3 or less,
Right.
yeah. Okay, so I just wanted to make that, other than that, that's it.
Well, I'm not sure it's really a comment, but, I'm thinking about next meeting now, and, like, would it be helpful to the people on the committee to have our treasurer come in here and say exactly what money it is and what it counts in, and stuff like that? Would that be something that this committee would want to see next week or not?
I'd like to see the options that are available. Anybody else want to hear the option?
At least get an idea of what money is in.
So maybe have Bill here next meeting to, like, say, this much is in this fund and this much is in this fund. Maybe like even tell us like how much we've been spending on the roads the last 3 years, because I don't think we've been spending anywhere near $150,000, but I could be totally wrong.
I would say that.
Yeah, I could be totally wrong on that too. So I thought that might be something we might want to do next meeting. It's not trying to dictate it. I'm just saying that's helpful. That's out there. And then the other thing I was thinking for next meeting is it's probably time for us to try to start quantifying what the 3 or 5 best options are, like what we think, which way we want to go in terms of like which options we want to consider.
Well, knowing what the cost is gonna be would really help determine that, right?
Right, knowing what the cost. and
How
what
much
have
money
and-
we have.
Yeah, right, exactly. So those would be my 2 suggestions for next meeting, if that's a comment or whatever, but you don't have to do that. People disagree, we should do something else.
I think it's a great idea.
That gives us kind of from what we have information from HRC, plus what monies do we have and or what monies could we have,
Right,
might help determine how do we,
how do we structure
and
that?
then structure and say, okay, you guys are gonna do this, you guys are gonna work on this, you guys are gonna work on this. And come up with some scenarios.
Just think we have a limited number of meetings to accomplish our task. So to jump ahead a little bit, one of the things that I think about is how do we sell to the village, to the residents, what they may need to come up with, or if we're gonna have them vote or whatever. And based on my background, one of the things that Beverly Hills did for private road residents was to offer them the opportunity to piggyback onto a village road project by putting their private road as part of that project. Because as we've just learned, the more you do, the less it costs. That can make it appealing to private road residents. So I only mention that because it's something to keep in the back of our minds as we're going through this process.
Well, let's
I don't want to wait
spread,
till the end of the process to bring this up, because it might be part of our discussions that we're gonna be doing in the next few minute meetings.
let's ask Brad what the private road people do with them in terms of getting a project kicked off.
We don't do too much with private roads in the municipalities that we work with. It's a conflict of interest. So, but Tony is correct that a lot of times they've gone and they've piggybacked on them and done the work. And again, if you size the project appropriately, like if you get a really big contractor, they're not gonna do a little small, but the size of the contract matters. You get a nice decently sized project, they'll be willing to take on a little bit of extra work. And I think that's an excellent point. I didn't even think of that.
So-
On how to involve those private roads.
Because that's a big advantage to private, we were one of 20 houses for the private road. That was a huge opportunity. And we got engineering services, because as you can see, who knows how to do this?
Yeah.
Unless
You don't have
you're a
to go to
road
bid,
engineer
yeah.
living in your neighborhood, you have no idea what you're doing. So that's a plum. It could also help us, because the more we do, the less it costs everybody. So something to percolate as we're going through
So
this.
there are HOAs governing some of these private roads. I mean, how do the private road people communicate the need?
Well, I've only been in Bingham Farms a little over a year, so I don't know your neighborhood governments, but usually there's an HOA, I think. There certainly is for the condo developments.
Yeah, we're on a private road, we have an HOA.
Okay, right. I think generally there's someone you can go to, and they have a board, and they have to, they're wrestling with how to do their road. And it might be something to give people who are, after all, paying the same taxes as everybody else, but not getting their road plowed or repaired. So this is something to give them for their tax money that would benefit everybody.
How would those private roads be evaluated by an engineer?
Well-
Where does that cost come in?
Well, that's something that's why I brought it up now. If we're gonna offer it, we would need to get that process going. And I don't think the HOAs, they don't have engineers,
Never have to hire one, yeah.
right? You got some little street that's beyond your ability to do, so that would have to be part of this whole package.
Would SimCog subsidize that type of thing or no?
Not construction, no. So COG is a planning institute.
The pays are.
Yeah. Oh, for a PASER rating?
Mhm.
It's not a, so if they're not a member of SimCog, then no, they would, so Bingham Farms is a member of SimCog. HOAs are members of SimCog. But I mean, it's something that, again, you can do this work with a sheet of paper or just with a handshake agreement with a contractor if you really wanted to. You don't have all the protections that you would, and that's why municipalities legally can't. They need to go out to competitive bid, things like that, but an HOA, they get agreement by all the residents, they can do what they wanna do.
But you don't know what you bought.
Yeah,
You know, we're-
You have no
so I mean,
idea
if
what
it's,
you
a-
bought.
if it's an agreement that, you know, again, I don't. That's a slippery slope, I don't know how much we would wanna get involved, because we don't want, we wouldn't, if we worked with the HOA, we want the HOA coming back on us for, because that's, we don't have a contractual
That-
relationship with them.
That's complicated,
That-
right?
Yeah.
Kathy's gonna,
Just FYI, I know Outlands is looking at redoing their roads right now. So, you know, it might be something to explore. So, yeah, just
Certainly worth-
FYI, there are a few private roads, and I know Woodland just redid theirs
That's right.
a number of years ago, so.
so how do they
Well, for a
communicate?
Cape Seal, yeah.
How does Outlands communicate that to village management? I mean, is it something that we all need to know about, or?
I think before they are approached, there should be an agreement of both the road committee here as well as the council, because it's the council's decision to do that.
Right.
So I think that's something internally council may want to start looking at, but also get some input from this committee.
Another thing that was offered in Beverly Hills was the taking back of the private road and making it village road. Which in the case of my neighborhood was, we paid the village to take, the village didn't buy it from us, we were giving this nasty road back to the village. And that would have cost our neighborhood about upwards of 200 grand. And we seriously looked at it because then we would be done. You know, we didn't eventually do it in our neighborhood because of physical logistics that, which I won't bore you with. But that's another option that we should probably explore, is some neighborhoods might be interested in having their private road become a village road, which would involve a payment by them to the village most of the time, unless it's a perfect road. Which is, complicates the mix, but it's another option to offer private road residents to equalize this a little bit.
Now the question becomes, were the roads originally done to state guidelines?
Yeah.
Since they were private.
I can say municipalities aren't taking on assets. They're trying to get rid of assets, so. It'd be a hard sell to the village, I would think.
True.
Yeah, just subjects that we ought to leave into our discussions.
And that's exactly why, because you don't know how they.
Right.
So the timing of this committee is established to a large extent because if something has to go on a ballot, that has to be prepared by midsummer or whatever the date was. What is it that has to go on a ballot? I mean, is there do all tax increases have to go on a ballot? Are we gonna have 4 proposals, choose A, B, C, or D, that what we wanna do with the roads? What actually goes on the ballot?
It would, a millage proposal would be on the ballot.
Does any millage, because
No.
my understanding is
No.
there's some level,
There's.
but the council could say any millage. we want.
And that could be one of your recommendations, is
Okay.
just raise the millage by X number.
Right,
Or, but if you're going to get bond funding, you need a guarantee
Yeah.
of where that money is coming from.
right,
Villages can't, or communities can't promise, we're borrowing money, we're gonna pay it this way. If you have a commitment through tax dollars raised in a millage, then, right.
that's the
that
guarantee,
would-
yeah.
You would have more insight on that than I do, I think, actually. You worked in this, haven't you?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did I describe that accurately?
You did.
Okay, all right.
So what really goes on the ballot is an increase in the tax rate because we want to do the roads.
Mhm.
Okay.
Not, do we do them or not? That's not, the question is not.
You're gonna
simply
raise
do
it to have the money to do the
Right,
roads.
it's, yes, so you would pick a number, let's just say two mills, right? You would pick that number and you would, in the village proposal, or the ballot proposal was, should the village raise the millage by 2.0 to fund road reconstruction? It might be a little more detailed than that, but this
But not a
essentially the
lot more
question.
than that, yeah.
The more deep, yes, that's correct, right.
You might want to put an expiration date for the millage.
Yes, that's
Yeah,
correct.
something.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, you're right. Right, there would be a timeline on there.
Everybody, okay? Now can I ask for a
Yes.
motion to adjourn?
Mhm.
Motion to adjourn.
Second,
Second,
all in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Thank you.
thank you.